I love Star Wars, but I also hate Star Wars. It can just be a really irritating franchise sometimes because every single awesome thing about it feels negated by an equally stupid thing. But I grew up on it, and so of course I have a really strong connection to the story and the world and the characters. I feel like I've kind of gone through a similar process with Star Wars as most people around my age. I started on the originals and prequels, loved them all when I was a kid, then grew up a lot and realized that, some of them just aren't that good. At all. But then things got weird when Episode 7 came out when I was still a teenager, and I got invested all over again. That was all well and good until Episode 8, which, at least in my opinion, killed the franchise a little bit. And then Episode 9 came out, which... So this alone is a massive problem for anyone who is or wants to be a Star Wars fan. Most of these movies just kind of suck. And so it's really hard to get invested in this grand sweeping narrative when over half the entries are stupid. And then you've got all these TV shows, which is more of the same, a bit of good and a whole lot of bad. And even if we ignore quality and pretend like these are all stellar, it's just, at least to me, way too much stuff. Like, this story has just gotten way too big. This here is, it's too much. I've got no issue with massive, sprawling sagas that require hours upon hours of your time to complete, but I don't know, I'd say Star Wars has gone a bit further than maybe it ever should have. Enjoying this story in a complete structured format has felt near impossible and kind of annoying. It's just so muddy now, both in terms of quality and quantity. And I swear, I'm not just saying, oh, there's too much Star Wars, stop making Star Wars. I am trying to say something a little different. In my opinion at least, the scale of every entry in a story should be fitting to its importance. And that's not really what's going on with Star Wars anymore. Rogue One, as an example. I like this movie a lot. Quite a lot, actually. It's a really fun time. But I kind of wish it hadn't ever been made, to be honest. Because as I was saying with scale and how it should match importance, this just feels too grand. Each entry in the original trilogy is around 2 hours long, and that makes sense. 3 2-hour feature films focusing on the most important events of the Star Wars narrative. But then you've got Rogue One. It focuses on a really specific event in this story that shouldn't be given so much attention. Star Wars is about Anakin Skywalker and Luke Skywalker. They are the focus. And so to have a spin-off that runs about as long as all of their individual films, and also looks like this, just feels strange. And it also takes place right in the middle of 2 major films, which makes finding the appropriate time to watch it kind of awkward. I often think about it in comparison to other stories I really love. Like, wouldn't it be kind of weird to watch books 1 and 2 of Avatar, and then just before you get to book 3, you watch an entire season that just focuses on what Suki was up to in the Fire Nation prison? I mean, yeah, on its own, that might be pretty cool maybe, but it feels like it would probably kill the pacing and take away from what's going on, at least to me. Or, like, would you want to watch 3 seasons of Breaking Bad, then 2 seasons about Marie and Hank's relationship, and then finish the rest of Breaking Bad? That'd be weird. Am I alone in this? I fully recognize that at the end of the day, this is purely preference, and everyone can enjoy a story however they want, but I think it's fair to say that if we're trying to establish the absolute best way to experience the core story of Star Wars, it doesn't include most of this stuff. And that's what I want. I want to be able to just watch the core Star Wars story without any annoying bad entries and without any unnecessary fat. And I fully know that if I really want a purist Star Wars experience, nobody's making me watch Rogue One or any of the other movies, but my point goes deeper than this, I swear. For a few years, I kind of gave up on the franchise because of all this stuff, and thinking that there was no way I could experience Star Wars in the way that I really wanted. Obviously, I don't want the sequels, and I don't really want to touch most of the prequels, so sure, I could just watch the original trilogy, but despite its flaws, I do really like Revenge of the Sith, and I really love Clone Wars. But it's not like you can just add those onto the original trilogy and have it flow perfectly, because it gets kind of weird with structure again. Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith both end at the exact same point, so do I just watch Clone Wars and experience the end of the first half of this big narrative, and then just go back and watch Revenge of the Sith, which covers all the same stuff again, but from a different point of view? Do you see what I'm kind of saying here? It gets really weird. But even if you solve that, you're still not fully good. You've got a whole bunch of other little problems, like all the little inconsistencies between Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars, and how Clone Wars gets you really attached to all these amazing characters who just effectively disappear from the main story if you treat Return of the Jedi as your endpoint. And yes, I know Rebels exists, but I'm sorry, I just can't like this show. So one day, I was just dwelling on all these dumb frustrations, and I decided it might be cool to try my hand at combining Episode 3 and the final 4 episodes of the Clone Wars into a big mega movie of sorts. And as soon as I started, I realized that this should probably just already exist. When I started listing and rearranging scenes, it proved way easier than I thought it would be. Most of this stuff just snaps together instantaneously. It's practically meant to be watched as a completed whole. The main narratives of them just hand off back and forth to each other so incredibly if you just put them in the right spots. And it makes for one of the most engaging film experiences just ever. So now what I would like to do is just kind of talk about this edit and share some of the things that I did, some of the things that I think are cool, and yeah, just kind of share this. So for the sake of clarity, I guess I'm going to refer to this edit and the specific films and shows that I have as my Star Wars story, but recognizing now that it's obviously not mine. I didn't make anything, I just trimmed some stuff here and there. But for the purposes of the video, I am going to call this my Star Wars story. So I'm going to run through this fairly quickly, pointing out some of the things I'm proud of or I think line up really well when combined. And let me just say for the record that I intend for none of this to come across as bragging. I'm proud of a couple little editing moments here and there, but by and large, this is an achievement for the Clone Wars and how well the creators told this story to fit within the film. Literally all I did was just put them together in the places they naturally fit. Firstly, I created this little intro to set the tone more appropriately for this narrative.
Not programmed. You have to learn to make your own decisions.
I understand. More than you realize. I understand wanting to walk away from the Order.
I know.
Then the movie starts off with a big animated chunk from the show, and then switches to the film in a way that I really love. I really like the way that Ahsoka and Rex's siege lines up with Anakin and Obi-Wan's rescue mission, from the opening shots to them getting trapped at the same time to the overall pacing and just some really neat transition moments.
Why are you here?
During this first act of the story is when I made my first big cut, removing the entire elevator sequence with Anakin and Obi-Wan. This might annoy some people, but it's just a preference of mine. I just feel like it damages the pacing and gets just a little bit too goofy. Just a cool little thing, but the weight of certain moments really hits a lot deeper when you experience them within the confines of this combined mega movie. Like these scenes.
Do it. Though any chance of learning more about Sidious from Dooku has been lost.
Why?
Because Count Dooku is dead. Anakin killed him while rescuing the Chancellor.
This exchange between Ahsoka and Maul and Anakin and Palpatine is probably the best example of just how perfectly this all works.
Every choice you have made has led you to this moment.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
And right here is the first point where I really tampered with the film. As I mentioned before, Star Wars is filled to the brim with plot holes and inconsistencies. One such inconsistency is in this moment where General Grievous talks to Obi-Wan as if he doesn't know that he knows how to use a lightsaber, which directly goes against everything in the Clone Wars, So I just went in and muted that line, put the music back in, as well as the lightsaber hum, added some mechanical noises, and then some coughing from Grievous to make it sound more natural. And it sounds a little weird at first because I was so used to them speaking here, but I think it works pretty well and fixes a small inconsistency within the story.
I will deal with this Jedi slime myself.
Your move.
You fool! Attack, Kenobi!
This scene is probably my personal favorite example of how these narratives combine to create something even more beautiful. Order 66 is another moment that just hits in a much more powerful way than before. Seeing all of the Jedi deaths and then cutting to Rex is incredibly tense.
Execute Order 66.
Yes, Lord Sidious.
The fully fledged final act of this mega movie has become quite possibly the most intense and epic third act of anything I've experienced in any film or any show or pretty much any story. The Clone Wars final act is incredible and tense on its own, and the Revenge of the Sith finale is really cool, but it often feels like it's a bit too over the top. But when you combine these two and they act as the grand climax to a 4-hour narrative, it just feels perfect. What once felt bloated now feels appropriately grand, and the consistent cutting between the three fights is just incredible. And around this point in the film is where I made a couple of other little adjustments to address things I, at least, consider to be issues. Firstly, I removed this little part where Yoda tells Organa he's going into exile. This just always bothers me because he falls in this fight with Sidious and then just immediately states that it's over and he has to exile himself, as if he couldn't just climb up or try again. Either way, he obviously still makes the decision to go into hiding by the end of the film, but this at least softens it and makes it feel a good bit less weird and forced. And now is the point where I'm going to make pretty much everybody mad. I cut the high ground line. But as controversial as that may be, I know I'm not alone in disliking this part. It always just felt kind of forced, at least to me. Anakin and Obi-Wan have been fighting each other on this crazy lava planet for like 10 minutes, balancing on beams, jumping around on droids, swinging on ropes, and dealing with constant ash and fire and lava flying everywhere. It's insane, but at no point does it inhibit their ability to keep fighting. And so, all of a sudden, Obi-Wan jumps on this little hill and decides, for no apparent reason whatsoever, that the fight must be over and Anakin could not possibly find a way out of this. Even though he could just jump to a different point on the hill, or keep standing on the droid, it's not going anywhere. He could even use the Force to just chuck a bunch of stuff at Obi-Wan. This just makes no sense to me. There's no reason for Anakin to suddenly be out of options after we just witnessed all of this. So, I just cut it out. And while it's not perfect, it feels more natural than before. It makes Obi-Wan saying it's over feel more ambiguous and up to interpretation, instead of it just being that it's because he's on a hill.
It's over, Anakin! You underestimate my power! Don't try it!
Also, I'm fully aware of why this actually happened. I know it's because of the Darth Maul connection from the first movie, but I don't think that's really set up that well, I don't think it really matters, and I think everything I said still stands. But anyway, the last significant change I made is something I imagine most people will appreciate. Darth Vader screaming no is just too corny and destroys a lot of the emotion the film had been building up to. So, similarly to the Grievous scene, I muted the audio, added the music back in, grabbed what I considered to be a better scream from a different film, and then added all of the appropriate Vader voice modulators to it, and plopped it back in. And again, it's not perfect, but to me at least, it sounds a million times better than before. And, of course, the conclusion feels even more powerful and heartbreaking in just about every way. The ending of Clone Wars on its own always leaves me feeling a bit empty every time I watch it, but this is just something else. Watching the entirety of these characters' stories play out across a 7-season show and then capping it all off with this thunderous, explosive, heart-shattering tragedy of a finale that basically destroys everything and everyone you fell in love with up until this point is pretty indescribable. It always leaves me in a really weird place every time I watch it, and I usually have to move on to the original 3 films pretty quickly in order to not just feel completely wrecked by the story. And so, yeah, that's basically my big 4-hour Revenge of the Sith mega movie. After completing this big 4-hour mega movie edit, I was feeling pretty content. I had addressed many of the big problems I had with the Star Wars narrative and had a pretty big, cool movie to enjoy. But the process of editing really got me thinking on other things I could do to streamline and enhance and fix Star Wars, and I just kinda wanted to keep going. So I decided to see what I could do with the original trilogy. And obviously, these 3 movies are practically flawless, so I had pretty much left them completely as is, with just a few little tweaks here and there. None of these are really necessary in any capacity, but some of them I just think are cool, and others are just to tie my Star Wars story together more neatly. A New Hope I left basically exactly the same. I just took out a lot of the things that the special editions add, because, they're stupid. I think that's a no-brainer. Empire Strikes Back, I left literally untouched. There's nothing to fix here or get rid of, except, well, maybe I'll find a way to get rid of this.
Scoundrel.
And this. But what I really spent time retooling is Return of the Jedi, and I'm sure that that's not a massive surprise. I love this movie to death, but there's just a few small things here and there that irk me a little bit. Firstly, getting rid of some special edition changes, obviously. This entire musical number, gone. I never want to think about this ever again. Secondly, what I consider to be the biggest flaw with this entire movie is the Ewoks. I don't imagine I really need to go into why they bother me. They're cute and fun, and I have no problem with their existence, but they just shouldn't be able to beat the Empire's forces in the way that they do. That's everybody agrees on that. It's just pretty deflating as a finale to everything that came before it. So I didn't go as far as to remove the Ewoks entirely, but instead I just removed all the scenes of them beating up stormtroopers. In my edit, they show up, they guide the crew to the Imperial base, pop out and cause a distraction, and then just get blown up a lot. I kept every scene of Ewoks being attacked, but no scenes of Ewoks attacking. This makes it much more exciting and rewarding, as it leaves exclusively the rebels as the ones saving the day. Something I am actually pretty proud of, though, is that I managed to salvage a little hero moment for Han Solo, who always kind of felt underutilized in the finale. I think most people agree on that. I restored a deleted scene of the rebels fighting their way into the bunker, and placing the bombs with Han Solo at the forefront of it all. And lastly, because my Star Wars story is obviously so Clone Wars-centric, but it concludes with this film, I thought it would be kind of weird to never see Ahsoka and Rex and Bo-Katan and Darth Maul ever again. So as Disney releases live-action scenes of these characters, as they have more scenes and they pop up every now and then, I'm trying to take some of those and plop them into the ending of this film. It's unfinished and not fully polished just yet, but I like how it feels more cohesive and emotional as a finale to see them in this montage, even if it's just a brief look. It feels like it's kind of a better conclusion to the entire story, rather than just to the original trilogy. And as one final part of my edited Star Wars story, I decided to create a little opener to the narrative. Seeing as I really don't like watching The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, but a lot of stuff from those films is important to an understanding of the Clone Wars show, I decided to combine them into a short little opening montage for the whole franchise. So I took the scene from Kenobi, set it to Duel of the Fates, and filled all of the little moments between their fight with a montage of scenes from the first two prequel films. This way, I get the backstory to Anakin as a character without watching two films I really dislike, and so that the story has a better flow with the lengths of its entries. It would feel kind of weird to be going from 2 movies to a show to a super movie, then back to 3 movies again. Now, it's a steady progression that all feels intentional, at least to me.
Are you ready? Are you? Then let's begin.
I'm glad to have met you, Anakin. I was glad to meet you too.
And then I put this little closing title drop on it.
You're a great warrior, Anakin. But your need to prove yourself is your undoing. Until you overcome it, a Padawan you will still be.
So yeah, that's basically my whole Star Wars story. It's probably not what everybody would most want from the franchise, but it's the closest I've managed to get to what I personally want. I just feel like it sucks sometimes when a story would be so much better if so much of the content was cut, or if some of the entries were rearranged, or if some pieces from those entries were cut but other things stayed. It's like, it feels like a big mess sometimes, and that's the reality with a lot of franchises. I feel like there's so many shows and movies and even book series that are just infinitely more powerful when they're just refined down to their very core. There is a lot of cool stuff from Star Wars that I didn't include in my edit, or in my overall story, or when I watch all of this, but it feels worth it in the end because the experience of viewing it as all there is just so much more powerful. Beginning the journey with Anakin in the Clone Wars, which is just this amazing 7-season-long story that gets better and better and better as it goes, building up to this just incredible finale, which then leads into 3 incredible, amazing films, is just... it's an awesome ride. It is just a great story. And having the final moments of Return of the Jedi be where this story fully, officially ends, just makes it as emotional and powerful and fulfilling as I think it can be. To me, there's no sequel trilogy to take away that punch. There's no spin-off shows to clutter up the story. I've just kind of erased all of that stuff from my brain. I just kind of pretend it doesn't exist when I watch these, and it has massively boosted my enjoyment of Star Wars as a franchise. No mess, no clutter, no excess, just a satisfying close to a tight, beautiful narrative. And I genuinely believe that when watched in this way, Star Wars makes for one of the greatest stories literally ever created. It's pretty amazing what's on display here when you trim out all of this fat. Maybe I come across as pretentious or like I've made a little fan fiction story for myself, but I hope I've made my case strong enough to kind of dispel that notion, because it's not like I did anything really special here. I just, like I said before, I just looked at a great story made by other people and took away the stuff that I felt didn't really add much to it. I didn't make anything at all. Really amazing, creative, talented people made Star Wars, every single part of it, even the stuff I don't personally like. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to share what I did, because I like my little version of Star Wars quite a lot. It's my own way to enjoy the story, and, I would hope that anybody else that might get frustrated with the state of the franchise, or is, in whatever way that may be, I hope they get something out of me sharing this project. So yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you for watching and hearing all this out, and yeah, I appreciate it.